Yo, what's up, guys? We're back for another UFC breakdown and predictions video. This week it's for UFC Vegas 71, which is a pretty entertaining card, actually, from top to bottom. Got a good main event in the heavyweight division between two top 5 guys in Sergei Pavlovich and Blaydes. Coming off a pretty good week last week with the UFC, maybe not predictions-wise, but we did win money betting on the Patreon, so make sure to go over there this week especially, man. There's 2 Bellators. We got KSW, we got Fury FC, we have LFA to go with this UFC, so you definitely want to go to patreon.com/MMAPredictionGuru, check out all the content over there, the bets that I have, and make some money. And besides that, man, definitely make sure to be locked into the channel. I think I'm going to be dropping a Bellator 294 breakdown and predictions video on the channel. If you want to get the 295 breakdown and predictions video and bets, then you're going to have to go on the Patreon most likely. But besides that, man, let's hit the like button on this video. Let's try to get a little bit more likes, a little more interaction. I would really appreciate that. And let's get into this first fight of the night here with Brady Hiestand and Batgeral Danaa. And both these guys, they're fighting at 135 pounds. Danaa, he's coming back after 10 months off. He lost back-to-back fights, took a little bit of a break, and he won 3 fights in a row before that loss, all in the first round. Got to step up in competition in his last 2. Lost to Chris Gutierrez, lost to Kyung Ho Kang. And he was winning the fight with Chris Gutierrez until he got knocked out, and then the fight with Kyung Ho Kang was very competitive. So he isn't necessarily looking bad, but he's taking a step down in competition here to try to get another victory, fighting a 23-year-old prospect in Brady Hiestand. Brady Hiestand, he successfully won his first UFC fight last November. He was able to beat Fernie Garcia in a fun back-and-forth decision, made a name for himself. He got 2 wins on the Ultimate Fighter, too, so he's proven he could step up to the plate. And he had a torn ACL during the Ultimate Fighter and in his fight with Ricky Turcios in his UFC debut, so he wasn't able to show a 100% version of himself. He looked better in the Garcia fight, and I think he probably will look even better on Saturday night. And matchup-wise for Batgeral Danaa, this is going to be the first wrestler he's going to have fought in the UFC. His 3 UFC wins, he didn't have to defend any takedowns, and he's only been taken down against 1 UFC opponent. Brady Hiestand is going to force Danaa to defend many takedowns, and it's going to be a new challenge for him. Danaa is a striker. He's going to be looking for the knockout, and he's pretty basic, but he gets the job done. He has good footwork, good pressure. He throws good feints, likes to throw the overhand right, left hook, and he'll throw the left hook overhand right. He can close the gap pretty quickly and land the punches accurately on the chin, especially with his left hook. And he mixes the combos up. I mean, sometimes he'll attack the body. Sometimes he'll come with the rear uppercut instead of the overhand. And he has decent ability to slip and rip in the pocket. He also has one-punch knockout power, which has shown itself on multiple occasions in the UFC. So it's dangerous to pressure Danaa because he's good at sliding out of range and then coming with the big counter. But most of the offense you have to worry about with him comes from the hands. We did see a slick elbow from him against Brandon Davis. And he'll also throw some front kicks, leg kicks, but isn't the most effective kicker. And Kyung Ho Kang did find success with the jab, with the leg kicks against Batgeral. And Batgeral is there to be hit. He doesn't move his head. He also carries his hands low, and he enters a lot of times throwing wide punches. So it can lead him running into shots, or in the case against Chris Gutierrez, running into a spinning back elbow. And he's proven to be durable, but Gutierrez was able to knock him out with that spinning elbow. And he has knockout power himself, like I said. And he hasn't had his takedown defense really tested much. In his fight with Healy Alatang was able to get 3 takedowns in the 3rd round. But overall, I would say Danaa showed good takedown defense, good balance, and his get-up game was there. But he was throwing strikes while trying to defend the takedowns, and I feel like that was a mistake. And against Hiestand, he needs to worry much more about defending than throwing strikes like flying knees and stuff. And he isn't going to accept the takedown when he gets put on bottom early, and he will work back up to his feet. But we did see him get controlled the last 2.5 minutes of the 3rd round once he accepted that bottom position. He can't allow Hiestand to put him on the cage or put him on his back, because if he does, it'll be a long night for Batgeral. Cardio hasn't been an issue for Batgeral, and he's been fighting the better fighters, but 33 is getting up there for bantamweight, hasn't fought in a while, and he's fighting a different kind of style matchup where it's not just going to be a striking fight, so we'll see how his cardio stands up here. But Brady Hiestand, he's super aggressive. He, like Batgeral, is a big bantamweight. He's going to have the slight size advantage here. Striking is pretty rudimentary. He does have a decent jab, rear cross. He'll throw some kicks out there, but striking is a means to an end to get it to the ground, and he's very hittable. So far, he's shown a good chin, but he has gotten KO'd against Chad and Helliger. He got dropped against Fernie Garcia, and Batgeral cracks heavy, so Hiestand has to be very cognizant of being touched early. He does have the faster feet. He needs to move, wait for his opportunity to hit the takedowns. And he has great wrestling. He has a good single, good double. He'll push fighters to the fence and work takedowns from there. He will work his way to the back, mat return guys, fully take their back if he can. And he could chain wrestle. He's just absolutely relentless in his pursuit of the takedown. And his cardio is elite. He can break a lot of guys with the pace, wrestling, and pressure. We saw Ricky Tercios, who's a similar fighter to Hiestand, win in a back-and-forth scramble fest, but I feel like he'll have a much clearer wrestling and grappling advantage against Danaa if he can implement his game plan. Personally, I think this fight could go either way. Batgeral is super dangerous, especially early in the fight. He could land clean and knock Hiestand out. He's also faced a better competition, but Brady Hiestand is a dog, and you have to really put him out to get him out of the fight. He's 10 years younger. He's the bigger guy, better wrestling and grappling by a pretty wide margin. I think he has the better cardio, and I think he will have the advantage here. I'm going to lean towards the younger fighter coming in off of victory. I'm going to pick Hiestand by decision. I think he can use his feet, stay out of danger, and then time some takedowns to win the fight. Alatang was the only fighter we've seen use a wrestling-heavy game plan in a round against Batgeral, and it was effective. So if Hiestand can do that same thing, then I see him getting the job done. It is possible, though, that if he can't get the takedown, you'll get knocked out. So that's why this fight's pretty close, but I'm going to lean towards the slight underdog here in Brady Hiestand. And the second fight night, this should be a banger right here between Priscila Cachoeira and Karine Silva. Great matchup. Both these girls have an all-gas, no-break style. Karine Killa Silva, she finished all of her victories. She's only been a decision one time. And Priscila Zombie Girl Cachoeira has finished 7 of her 12 wins. Between the two fighters, they have 15 first-round finishes. The winner of this fight is probably getting it done inside the distance. And Karine Silva, she's looking to build off of her performance in her debut. She got a nice choke against a veteran in Poliana Botelho. She currently has won 6 fights in a row, so she's on a good run. Priscila Cachoeira, she's been up and down, but she's a UFC veteran and she's faced the much better competition overall. She's shown the best form of her career as well recently. She teamed up with the MMA Masters. The MMA Masters has quietly been dominant in 2023. They built up a pretty strong women's team as well. And her last fight, Cachoeira knocked out Ariane Lipsky in just over a minute. She's won 4 of her last 5 fights. So if she can win this one, it should be time to give her a ranked opponent. And Karine Silva, she's super aggressive. In this fight, I think she's going to be looking for takedowns, and she should have the grappling advantage over Cachoeira. She's not that dangerous on the feet, but Silva is getting better. She's athletic. She's mobile. She's improved her distance control. She moves. She works her jab in the rear cross. She'll look for head kicks. She has 9 knockouts, and I do think she has some power, but it's a little bit deceiving because 7 of the 9 fighters that she's finished via KO had 0 wins. She's also credited with the TKO win over Cindy Rocha, but it was actually due to breaking her arm with an armbar. And Silva did land a big overhand right that did sit down Botelho before getting the submission in her last fight. So her striking is dangerous, but she's definitely more potent on the ground. She's has okay wrestling. She has a fast double, and it's pretty well-timed and explosive. I think it'll be effective in this matchup. And she'll be relentless with her takedowns. She can chain wrestle, too. And on top, she's effective. She's submitted a couple girls, but she prefers to use her ground and pound and then kind of work away to eventually finish the fight. Good control. She is very active. She's gotten finished a couple times from the top position, such as when Marina Moroz and Marina Maknikina were able to submit her. But both those girls are known for having good games off their back, and they're pretty high-level fighters. And I feel like Silva's improved a lot since those losses. And Silva's also good on bottom. We saw her hit that armbar on Cindy Rocha. She caught her opponent on the Contender Series in a guillotine as she shot in, and she has a few other submissions from full guard. Super flexible girl, but she did lose the first round of her Contender Series fight due to being held down and trying to play jiu-jitsu on bottom. And I feel like potentially if she fights a good wrestler. She could lose a fight that way. Not this matchup particularly, but cardio to me with Silva is also a question mark. She's been in the second round only 2 times, and she lost both those fights. 3 times, and she's lost 2 of the 3 of those fights. She didn't look tired in her fight with Jan, but it was very early in the second round that she got the finish. And I feel like if it goes longer, that Cachoeira have the advantage because she has much more experience in that type of fight, and she pushes a high pace. So that's something to monitor. If it gets out of the first 7.5 minutes, Silva could potentially be in for a long one. But Priscila Cachoeira, she has an ugly fighting style, but she comes in great shape. She hits heavy, and she's improved on not being quite as reckless. She pressures in behind the jab a little better. She'll throw the uppercut, her rear cross, overhands, and most of her offense does come from the inside, winging big hooks, and she'll attack the body. A lot of her punches are slow and loaded, but she's super active, and she has big power, so if she lands clean, she could put you out. She also has okay calf kicks, but mostly from the outside, she struggles a little bit. If you brawl with Cachoeira, she will put you out. Her chin is elite, and we've seen her even against girls like Lipsky, who's also a heavy hitter that really likes to be in that brawl. She was able to overcome her there, but she's not a great wrestler or grappler, Cachoeira. Cachoeira stands tall. She's square. She overextends and loads up. She gives easy entries in for the takedowns, and she isn't very good off her back. She can explode up sometimes, and she has improved a little bit, I feel like, but she gives her back to stand up, and she is someone that's difficult to finish. She isn't going to go away easy, but she's been submitted by rear naked choke twice. She did gouge the eyes of Jillian Robertson trying to get away from the finish, so obviously she's willing to do whatever to not lose, but I feel like if Silva gets it to the ground, she's going to have a pretty significant advantage, and I feel like Silva is just more skilled, mobile, well-rounded, and I feel like if she stays sharp and smart, she should be able to get the job done here. I'm going to pick her via front choke or rear naked choke, and I'm going to say it happens in the second round. So I'm just going to go with Silva here by submission. And this is a good under-the-radar fight right here. 2 prospects going at it. Both guys are on long win streaks. They both won their UFC debuts. And Francis Marshall, he's undefeated. He's on a 12-fight win streak. He knocked Marcelo Rojo out in his UFC debut. And he still has a lot to prove. He hasn't fought many good fighters. But William Gomis, he certainly has fought superior opponents. He's 11-2 overall. He's on a 9-fight winning streak. And he started his career 2-2. But you look at his losses, they came against Saladin Parnassi, who's a former KSW champion, and Morgan Charrier, who's a former Cage Warriors champion. And this is going to be his first fight in the United States, so it's a big opportunity for him to make a good impression, make a lot of new fans, and the winner of this fight's going to get a step up. So it's a big fight for both guys. I think that this is a fight to prove who's one of the better prospects going forward at featherweight. And both these guys are young, 24 and 25 respectively, so they still have a lot of room to grow, and a loss isn't going to push them back too far in the rankings here. But I am excited for this fight, and I think the winner could go on to get in some big fights pretty quickly. Francis Marshall, he is a solid striker. He's economical with his footwork. He has good boxing. He fights at a high pace. He mixes it up. He uses boxing to set up his takedowns, and he has nice hands. He throws good jabs, good lead hooks, fast 3-2s, good 1-2s, 1-2s, left hooks, and he puts longer hand combos together as well. He doesn't have the greatest head movement, and right now he's super durable. He's willing to exchange, plus he's confident in his conditioning, but he needs to sharpen up his defense going forward. He has big power, and he can hurt guys, so he's a solid striker. And he's a good wrestler as well. He has a solid amateur wrestling background. He'll shoot fast singles and doubles, stays active on top. He transitions with his ground and pound pretty well. He has 4 rear naked choke wins, and his cardio is on point too. For William Gomis, he's a big fighter for the weight. He's going to have a 4-inch height advantage. He's fast, mobile. On the feet, he does tend to run a lot. He likes to run and then kind of try to counter with the check right hook or the pull too. And time the takedowns. He has good wrestling, but his defense is a little bit loose. I feel like he's a hittable fighter, And opponents who could stuff his takedowns and pressure him, make it more of a stand-up fight, I think are going to have some success. Gomis is fast and he has some pop. He'll throw some okay kicks out there too, but his striking overall to me has holes. We saw Jarno Ennis laying quite a few lead hooks on Gomis, which is a punch that Marshall is good with. And Gomis is a good wrestler. He does a good job timing the level changes. His body locks are on point. His top control is solid, and he tends to grind out a lot of his wins. His ground and pound is there, and he can use that to kind of keep the position, but he's not a big finisher. He has good cardio, and he can keep the footwork and takedown game going for 15 minutes, so pretty difficult puzzle to solve. But I think the effective pressure of Francis Marshall is going to break Gomis, and I don't know if necessarily he's going to finish him, but I think he's going to cleanly win down the stretch. Gomis needs takedowns to win here, and I find it hard to see him getting takedowns on Francis Marshall. Marshall's an American wrestler, and Gomis has never fought an American wrestler before. I think early on in the fight, Gomis is going to have the footwork and speed advantage, but as it goes on, Marshall's going to use his pressure and efficiency of movement, boxing, to get the job done. And I actually am going to pick Marshall to get the finish, so I'm going to say he wins via second round KO TKO. And this next fight, I don't got a lot to say about this one. It's a pretty easy fight for me to predict, but it's not one that I'm overly confident in just because of Junior Tafa's limited experience in MMA, and I don't know anything really extensively about his grappling. I did see him defend a few takedowns, and that's why I'm more confident he can get the job done, but I'm not super sold on Mohammad Usman's wrestling or think it's great, but if he can get it to the ground, I don't know anything about Tafa's grappling from the bottom position, and I don't think Usman's necessarily a great grappler, but he's a big guy, and maybe he could just smush Tafa and finish him off, but personally, I think Tafa's going to spark Usman here. Usman's going to have to wrestle, and I just haven't seen the offensive wrestling in MMA for me to believe that he's going to take and hold Tafa down for any meaningful period of time. Tafa is a very aggressive guy. He's fast, skillful, he's durable. He's the vastly superior striker. He has a lot of experience in striking sports like kickboxing, and he's Samoan, so he's super durable, and he's someone that's going to come forward and bang. And I just see him getting the first round knockout. I mean, Usman is a real untechnical striker that just throws overhands and some random kicks out there. And he is a big, explosive guy. But I just feel like Junior Tafa is going to be able to get the job done here. But personally, it's like I would bet the under. The fight doesn't go to decision before anything else. I know that those are probably both pretty juiced. But it's just, man, I mean, I'm a little bit worried if Tafa ends up on his back that he could just get finished really quickly. But I think the striking, it's no competition, and I think that's where the fight's going to start, and I have to kind of go with Tafa here. And this next fight's a female fight between Karol Rosa and Norma Dumont, Brazil and Brazil crime right here. And it's going to be at 145, which is pretty good in my opinion. I mean, I guess they're not going away from that division. Norma Dumont's the only girl that really has been holding it down at 145 pounds. She's by far the most active girl at that weight class. It's going to be her fifth fight at 145 pounds. She's 3-1 overall in the division. Her one loss, she did come into that fight with an injury. She missed weight, so I don't think it was the best indication of how good she can be at 145. Her other three performances were all pretty good. She's coming off that win against Danielle Wolf, which can't really read much into that victory. Obviously, Wolf was an inexperienced MMA fighter with a good boxing background and a really big girl, so it wasn't a bad win, but it was against an inexperienced opponent, and at 145, it usually is hard to get a lot of credible wins, but she's getting a girl coming up here in Karol Rosa who got ranked at 135, was able to do well in that weight class, and then in her last fight, she got defeated by Sarah McMahon, and now she's decided to move up here and fight at 145, so I don't know if this is a permanent move for Rosa, or she's just looking to get a fight in, or what it is, but if she could perform well at 145, maybe she could become an instant player at the weight class, and we'll see what happens. But as far as how they match up, Karol Rosa, she's a technical brawler. She wants to stay in the pocket, work the jab, the 1-2s, 3-2s, and counter hooks. She has some power, and she's durable. She's high volume, so she tends to do well in pocket wars. She has pretty good leg kicks. And in the clinch, she'll throw some nasty knees. But defensively, she's super hittable. She's going to have to figure out how to get past the jab of Dumont in this fight. And I don't know how she's going to do up at 145 pounds with the power. I feel like Dumont is the heaviest puncher that Karol Rosa has fought in the UFC. And Rosa does have serviceable wrestling and grappling offensively. When she fights opponents who have a hole on the ground and in the wrestling, she can take them down and beat them up. But her defensive wrestling has not held up historically against good wrestlers and grapplers. She's been submitted twice, and in her one UFC loss, she got out-wrestled for 3 rounds against Sarah McMahon. She ended up giving her back in the second and third round, spent pretty much the entire second round and half of the third round with McMahon on her back. She was able to finally reverse late in the third, but it was just a little bit too little, too late. And it's been a while since that fight for Rosa. It's been about 6 months, I believe. So maybe she's put in some work on her wrestling. I guess it hasn't been that long, but we'll see how she's gonna react to taking her first loss in the UFC, coming back here. For Norma Dumont, she well-rounded fighter. She's tough to beat for the most part. She's light on her feet. She could switch stances, moves in and out quickly. I think she has the faster and better footwork. And she has a fast jab. She has good counter-punching ability with the rear cross. She'll throw power combos off the back foot to try to get fighters hesitant to pressure her. And she does tend to slow down a little bit and become more hittable. Her volume also sometimes can be lacking. So I feel like Rosa potentially could make it competitive on the feet, but I do think that Norma Dumont is the better striker. I think that she has better combination. She works the jab better, and she has better footwork and better defense as well. She also throws more kicks. I think she's a little more diverse with her offense. But yeah, I mean, I feel like Dumont is a girl that has pop on her punches too. So both these girls have pretty decent power. And Dumont is a solid grappler in her own right. She's a brown belt. She'll look to steal rounds with takedowns, and she does a decent job grinding against the cage. She isn't the best wrestler, but when she does go for takedowns, she usually gets them because she times them well. And she likes to take the back. She has a couple rear naked choke finishes. I haven't seen her really work on bottom, but I feel like she would be okay there. I think that she has the skills. And cardio's not bad for Dumont, but I think an opponent should always look to put the pressure on her and try to make her fight at a high pace if they're fighting Dumont, because that is something that in the past she's shown issues with. But I think it's primarily going to be a stand-up fight in this one, and I favor Dumont. I believe that Rosa to win is going to have to take a lot of risks, try to take shots to give shots, but I think that she's also going to look to put Dumont on the cage to try to take her down, but I just don't see her having too much success with the wrestling and the grappling. And defensively on the feet, footwork-wise, Dumont is much sharper. Her counter-punches come fast and accurate. She has power to keep girls honest, and I see her picking Rosa off the clean counters with the jab. And depending on how Rosa fights, either cruising to a decision win or maybe even getting a KO TKO finish. But historically, Dumont isn't a big finisher, and Rosa's tough, so I'm going to predict Norma Dumont to win this fight via decision. And this next one, this fight I'm looking forward to right here with Rani Yajya taking on Montel Jackson. And it's been a while since Rani Yajya's fight. It's been a year and a half. But if you've been watching my channel for a while now, you know that I pick Rani Yajya in a lot of fights when he's been the underdog, when it's been close odds. And he's gotten the job for us done time and time again. So this is one of these guys that's perennially underrated. And he's been putting it down for years. I mean, this was a WEC guy. He was someone that fought over in Japan and had a lot of success over there. And he's been fighting, I believe, since long time ago. I mean, since, I don't know, I think the early 2000s. Maybe even he had a fight in, I think it was 2002 when he had his first fight. But you look at Rani Yajya in the UFC, he's actually had a really stellar record. But he tends to fight infrequently, and he fights lesser opponents a lot. So it's interesting to see him getting this step up, and I think he's been kind of wanting that recently. Now he's getting older, and I think he wants to finally test himself and see exactly where he's at in his career. He had a couple fights with Cody Garbrandt recently that he had to pull out of, which I'm sure sucked for him because that was a big-time fight against a big name, and it was a winnable matchup. But now he's getting Montel Jackson here, who isn't necessarily a huge name for the casuals, but for hardcore fans, people know him. I mean, he has bigger hands than Francis Ngannou, huge guy for the weight class, and extremely skilled. He's someone that's coming off a win 5 months ago against Julio Arce, and everyone knows that watches the sport religiously that Julio Arce is a tough guy to get out of there too. So that was a good victory for Montel Jackson. And now he's getting a way different matchup though, and this is the test right here. This is a good fight that the UFC gave matchup-wise for Montel, because I feel like Montel is a guy that's kind of right on the precipice. He's right on the cusp of potentially fighting these better guys, getting in the rankings and getting in the top 10, top 5 title picture, which I don't know if he'll ever get there, but getting in that kind of career trajectory. But 2 times they've had him fight wrestler grapplers. I guess he's fought a couple of different ones that he's been able to get the victory over, like JP Blaydes and some lower level guys, but the guys that are legit, like Yajya legit, like Brett Johns, Ricky Simone, when he fought those guys, he lost, and he got taken down pretty easily. So I think the UFC is saying, okay, we're going to put him against this guy, Yajya, 38, hasn't fought in over a year. He's getting up there in age and taking a lot of wear and tear, a lot of miles on the body. And if he can beat this guy, if he could stuff the takedowns and keep it on the feet and either knock him out or win a decision, then we can give him a top 15 matchup next. And Yajya, he's another guy that it's like, if he wins this fight, then you got to give him a big-time fight next, man. I mean, he's won 2 fights in a row. He's won, 8 out of 10 fights if he wins this one. So he would deserve a big matchup next, too. He's coming off 2 wins also. He beat Kyung Ho King in his last fight, who's also a good fighter. So Yajya still has some juice. I mean, he even had a draw with Barzola, who's, in my opinion, maybe a top 15 bantamweight in the world currently, even though he's over there at Bellator. But, yeah, I mean, as far as this fight, how you're going to break it down, obviously, if you're keeping it standing, Montel Jackson's going to have a gigantic speed advantage, reach advantage, and he's going to be trying to keep the guy Yajya at the end of his strikes with the 1-2s. He's going to try to work the jab and try to walk him into a big shot and knock him out. And Yajya is a guy that he is aggressive on the feet, and he'll close the gap and throw big punches and pressure forward, throw kicks, and I feel like his striking has gotten better. But if he can't get the takedowns, can't make it more of his game, he does tend to tire, get really sloppy, and become very hittable. And one thing about him, though, is the guy's extremely durable. He's extremely hard to finish. I mean, he hasn't been finished since 2009. You go back and you watch that knockout loss to Joseph Benavidez, and I'm not trying to hate on Kim Winslow or anything. Obviously, she kind of had her bad run of the sport as a ref, but she was the ref for that fight with Hani and Joe B, and I think that was a premature stoppage, personally. I mean, I think that Hani I'm not saying he would have won because it was the first round. He got clipped hard and was on the ropes, but I think that was stopped definitely early. The other KO TKO loss of Hani's career came via soccer kicks in 2007, so obviously he's not going to have to worry about getting kicked in the head while he's on the ground in this fight. And yeah, so I feel like, honestly, Jackson, he's not a big finisher, man. I mean, the guy has that tantalizing ability, and you'll see him get knockdowns on guys. Like, you got the knockdowns on JP Blaydes, he got some knockdowns on Felipe Colares, but he tends to struggle to finish guys, especially guys that are good on the ground where he doesn't want to follow them down. He doesn't have that sense of urgency. He'll let you back up and just kind of go back to pot-shotting you. And that's why I think the over, if you're on the Montel Jackson side, or Montel Jackson by decision, potentially could be some good bets, man. I mean, it's extremely hard to get Hani out of there. And if you think Jackson's just going to be able to outstrike him with that straight left and with his superior speed, which I think he's going to have a huge speed advantage, and he's going to have the boxing advantage and the length advantage. And if Hani can't get inside, then obviously it's going to be a long night. But I don't necessarily know if Jackson's going to have that ability to finish him, really. But I guess we're gonna see. I just think if you're on Jackson's side, you can kind of take away that big number, because I think that number is a little bit crazy, minus 550, minus 600, and pick him by decision, it'd be like big plus money, whereas him by finish is still minus money, which I don't really get. Like, how could you ever justify picking like Montel, even if he gets the knockout, like by knockout minus 135 against a guy that hasn't been killed since 2009, that's been fighting for like over 20 years and has been finished twice by strikes, and Montel Jackson's a guy that's not finished guys like Terrence Allman and JP Bays and Felipe Kalarish and Julio Arce, like these guys that are, I guess Arce is higher level, but those other guys are low level fighters that are much worse than Rani Yajya. So I think it's hard. I would be surprised if Jackson gets the KO TKO. If he does, then Rani should probably hang him up. But yeah, I mean, as far as the grappling and the wrestling goes, obviously we know Rani Yajya is one of the best grapplers in the sport, any weight division, and he's going to have a massive advantage if he can get it to the ground, if he can get to the back of Jackson, who does tend to give his back quite often. And Jackson has okay defense freestyle wrestling-wise. Like, he can defend wrestling shots pretty well. But if you can use the single to get into the body lock or just get into the body lock in general, his upper body takedown defense is pretty bad, man. I mean, I feel like he gets taken down so easily with the body locks. It's a little bit surprising how easily he allows these guys to take him down with the body lock entries, which Rani Yajya, man, I mean, if he can get inside, get the take, I could see Rani Yajya early, like, winning the first round of this fight easily. I could easily see him going in there, getting into the back in round one, controlling. And one thing about Montel Jackson, he's super composed. He has those really big hands, so he can hand fight really well. And he's hard to finish. He's hard to choke. So, but he'll lose minutes by just allowing himself to be in those positions and showing a lack of urgency. But it's hard for me to pick Rani, man, off this layoff. I really like picking Rani because I like his style. I've been a fan of him for a while, and I like jiu-jitsu. You know, I do jiu-jitsu, and Rani is someone that I watch, and I like his jiu-jitsu style too. So I want to pick him here, but I'm ultimately going to pick Montel Jackson by decision. But I just feel like this fight, the line is way off, man. I feel like what's the difference between Rani Yajya and Brett Johns? Like, is there that big of a difference? I mean, I feel like the wrestling is probably pretty close, and Rani's way better on the ground. Maybe Brett Johns is more athletic and a little bit better striker. But, yeah, I mean, I feel like Rani could win this fight. I feel like it's, like, going to come down to the gas tank and just how Rani comes back off these injuries with his age. But if he comes back looking like the old Rani, I see him winning the early round. Like, the first round, I think he'll definitely win if he looks like his usual self. And then you can go back on the Montel side after at that point and bet on the live bet number on Montel Jackson, because one thing about Rani Yajya is his cardio is always an issue for him in every fight. And Montel stays composed. He has the cardio. And if after the first round Rani can't finish the choke, I think Montel could rally, win the second, win the third, get the decision win. And that's kind of what I'm going to pick as my official prediction too. So I'm going to go with Montel Jackson by decision. And I think that betting him live could potentially be a good spot here if Rani gets off to that hot start in the first round like I think he's going to get off to. If Rani just gets out there and gets dusted, then maybe, you know, he shouldn't have came back after the layoff and the injuries. But I don't think that's going to happen, man. I think people are kind of underestimating Rani Yajya once again here. I think he's going to put on a pretty competitive fight. And this is a good fight. Two vets here. Ricky Glenn taking on Christos Giagos. Both these guys are recently fighters that have been infrequently competing. Ricky Glenn's, again, coming off over a year layoff. After his last fight, he came back after a long layoff and had that pretty impressive performance where he was able to come back at the 10-8 in the third round against Grant Dawson and get the draw, where you look at Grant Dawson, he's, you know, been able to defeat everyone else that he's fought. So that's a good feather in Ricky Glenn's cap right there. And obviously he didn't really capitalize on that momentum because he hasn't fought since then. But if he can win this fight against Giagos, then fight again quickly, I think he could potentially work himself into a top 15 type of fight. But he's going to have to fight more regularly to do that. Christos Giagos, someone that's up and down in the UFC, and recently he's gotten to step up in competition. Like, you look at his last two opponents, and man, I mean, they've been giving him some beast, man. He fought Arman Sarukian, and obviously that fight didn't go good for him. He got finished early in that one, and I feel like he's just not really on that level of an Arman Sarukian. I don't know why they had him in there against a guy at that level. And then he fought Thiago Moises, another one where he just didn't get the job done in that one. Moises quickly finished him in the first round. So Christos Giagos is coming off back-to-back first-round losses. So he really has to bounce back and look good here. He hasn't fought since June of last year, so it hasn't quite been a year. Like I said, I thought it was over a year, but it's almost been a year for him. And Rick Glenn, he hasn't fought in a while. I mean, the last time that he fought was that was in, I believe, October of 2021. But yeah, when you look at how these guys match up, I think Giagos is going to have to bring it to the ground here. He's a decent striker, and I think he's the faster guy. I think early in the fight, he could potentially be competitive on the feet, but Giagos has cardio issues, and Ricky Glenn's a cardio machine that pressures forward, super durable, throws a lot of volume, tricky southpaw. He wants to get on the inside, hand fight, come over the top with elbows, good knees, and he's really good at breaking guys, breaking them down and then finishing them in the later rounds or just getting comprehensive dominant decision wins. And he's always going to be coming at you, so you have to really be aware against a guy like Ricky Glenn on the inside too, because he could be hittable. You could be getting the better of him, and then, man, he's going to land a big knee, big elbows, keep the volume high, stick in there, and before you know it, he's going to turn the tide on you and start wearing you out. So it's just, you have to be really aware of Ricky Glenn's pace, pressure, and effectiveness on the inside, on the feet. But one thing about Rick Glenn that he does struggle with is takedown defense. His takedown defense is pretty questionable, and Christos Giagos is a guy that goes for a lot of takedowns and gets a lot of takedowns. He's an underrated wrestler, and I think early in the fight, and if he comes in shape, he could maybe just take down and grind Ricky Glenn out. But one thing about Ricky Glenn is the guy's not going to accept the bottom position. He's always going to be moving, working back up to his feet, and when he gets back up, he's going to be right back in your face. So you're going to have to get ready for that 3 rounds of up, down, and having a guy never stop coming at you. And another thing with Ricky Glenn is if he could stuff the takedown and get on top or get you down, which he doesn't go for a lot of takedowns, but occasionally he will, then he really does work on top. He is really good with elbows, with ground and pound, and he can be very effective. So I just feel like he's going to overwhelm Giagos with his pressure, his pace over 3 rounds, and I think he's going to finish him in the second or third in close quarters with flurries of elbow, with knees potentially. I feel like Giagos is kind of getting up there. Both these guys are 33, 34, but Giagos has had fights against tougher guys and more damage taken, I feel like. Ricky Glenn's a guy that's used to taking damage to give damage, but he hasn't been finished like Giagos has recently, and I don't know where Giagos' confidence is at. I feel like Ricky Glenn's going to be able to go in here, and if he can keep it standing and not just get grinded out where Giagos could take a break and control on the ground and get some breaths, then I think he'll be able to wear him down and finish him. So I'm going to go with Ricky Glenn via finish in the second or third round. And up next, we got Jeremiah Wells taking on Matthew Semelsberger. This is a really fun fight. It's a tough fight to call, if you ask me. Matthew Semelsberger, he looked really good in his last fight against Jake Matthews. Went in there, dropped him early in the first, had pretty dominant second and third round. It was competitive, but Semelsberger clearly won. He was able to show off his offensive wrestling in that one, which I was surprised to see him be able to take down and control a guy like Jake Matthews. But Semelsberger did do that. And Jeremiah Wells, he's undefeated in the UFC, and he's on a pretty long win streak, but coming off a bit of a layoff, he's a little bit older, and this is probably a step up in competition from guys like Court McGee, Blood Diamond, and some of the other fighters that he's fought recently. So we're going to see how it plays out. Obviously, when you look at these guys height-wise, Semelsberger is going to have a pretty significant height advantage, and I've seen in other fights, like, for instance, when Jeremiah Wells fought Vinicius de Jesus, that he struggled a little bit with the height differential and just the ability from de Jesus to use his legs to throw leg kicks and back him up and just pressure him and kind of limit what Wells was able to do, because he didn't let Wells get inside that much after the first round. But when you're looking at how both these guys fight from a style perspective, I think they match up pretty good. Semelsberger is going to be the pressuring fighter, trying to stay long on the outside, roll with the punches when Wells comes in with the big explosive blitzes, or try to just get out of the way of those shots and then defend the takedown, stay off the cage. And I would work leg kicks in this one if I was Semelsberger. and just try to stay active with the kicks on the outside, use the jab and use the straight shots. His rear cross is money, and that's something that he has big power with and he's accurate with and dangerous with. He has several knockouts, one-punch knockouts with that right cross. So that's the main punch that Jeremiah Wells has to be very aware of. And Semelsberger is just going to have to be smart on the feet, control the distance, pressure, defend the takedowns, and try to land those long-range strikes. And Jeremiah Wells, he's going to be moving around. He's going to be the more mobile guy by a long shot. Semelsberger, he likes to stay more flat-footed and centered. But Wells, he's always bouncing in and out, bouncing from side to side, and then exploding in with power combinations. You'll throw a 1-2s, and then you'll come with a big left hook after it, or the big left hook one and then a 1-2, and he'll rip the body, come up to the head. Super explosive, closes the distance really quickly. And we've seen Semelsberger fight a couple guys that have that kind of style. I would say the most similar striking style that we've seen him face to Jeremiah Wells is when he fought Chaos Williams. And that was a really competitive fight where arguably Semelsberger could have won, but Chaos, in the eyes of the judges, probably landed the bigger shots and was a little bit more active. Semelsberger has an issue sometimes being low volume, and I think Wells is going to be able to take advantage of that with his veteran savvy, because he's going to be able to close the gap, I feel, and get Semelsberger against the cage and maybe get him down a couple times. And I think that his gas tank is going to hold up, even though I am a little bit worried about that. That's kind of the one thing that I could see Semelsberger getting into the fight and coming back late. But if Wells' gas tank holds up, I think he could win this one pretty comfortably just by moving around, not letting Semelsberger get set or find that cross, and Semelsberger just not being active enough, which has been a problem for him in the past, and closing the gap, landing some punches, getting some clinch control time against the cage, getting a couple takedowns, and getting the decision. I've seen AJ Fletcher, who I think is a much, much lesser version of Jeremiah Wells, have a lot of success and get a first-round win, where, not a first-round win, but win the first round, where he controlled Semelsberger on the ground, was able to take him down a couple more times, be fairly competitive on the feet. And after seeing that fight, I'm leaning towards Jeremiah Wells getting this one done via decision. I think that he's just going to be a little bit more active and be able to do a little bit more. So I'm going to go with Jeremiah Wells in this one to stay undefeated in the UFC and keep on moving forward. This next one right here, this is a matchup I'm pretty confident in the winner here, with Yasmin Lucindo taking on Brogan Walker. I'm pretty impressed with Yasmin Lucindo, if I'm being honest. I feel like she's really good for only being 21 years old. She's super well-rounded. I saw her recent fight before getting to the UFC where she fought a girl that fought in the Contender Series that's not bad. She out-grappled her with ease. She was able to get in on the body locks, take her down, and control her from the top position. She had the cardio to do it for 3 rounds. Her pressure on top and control on top was pretty good. She was effective. And she also, in her last fight, showed that she can, bang it on the feet, and she's very skilled standing, and she has power, and she's very fast and slick. And she did slow down in that fight, but I think that was a great learning experience, fighting another really, really young, high-level prospect and going to war with them in a back-and-forth type of fight. Her first kind of big, high-profile fight, I think she's going to look even better here. And Brogan Walker, she's older girl. She's 34 years old at this point, who she's had a good career. I mean, you go and look at some of the people that she's beaten. She's beaten some good names like Miranda Maverick back in the day and things like that. But she's getting up there in age, and I think that's catching up to her. At least if you look at her performance from her last fight, maybe she can come back and put on a better performance in this one. But I think matchup-wise, it's a really hard matchup. But you look at her last fight when she fought Juliana Miller, that was for the tough crown, and there was a lot of beef going into that fight. Maybe that played a factor. Maybe Brogan Walker got a little bit too hyped up, got an adrenaline dump, and she was trying to knock her out so bad on the feet that it got her taken down in that amateur way and just held down and dominated on the mat. But it's hard for me to have a lot of confidence in Brogan Walker coming back and having a significantly better performance. You've seen her do it before, but even if she looks the best she can look, I think at the best, Brogan Walker, it would still be a hard fight for her against Iasmin Lucindo. And you look at how, like I said, Lucindo, she's a well-rounded girl. She's athletic. She has power in that right cross, and she's pretty decent with the boxing. She has good kicks as well. Brogan Walker, she's switch stance girl. She likes to throw a lot of check hooks when she's in southpaw, and she'll throw some kicks. But really, mainly her right hook is her best shot from southpaw. And then orthodox, she'll throw the big overhands, and she likes to wrestle too. So she has decent wrestling skills and okay striking, and she can get on top. She does have effective ground and pound and control. That's probably what she's going to want to do in this fight, try to use that check hook to get in the inside, get the takedown, and kind of bully the younger girl here in Lucindo. But her takedown defense looked really bad in her last fight. She looked slower. She looked plotty with her striking. And I feel like Lucindo's the sharper, more technical striker. I think she can go in there and get takedowns too if she wants to. I think that she's more athletic. She's younger. And I just see her dominating the fight and getting the win via decision. I think Iasmin Lucindo is going to get the job done here and win this fight, get her first UFC victory. And this next one, we got a fan favorite fight with Bobby Green taking on Jared Gordon. Bobby Green's a guy that anytime he fights, a lot of people are going to be tuning in. He's earned a fan base with his fight style and long career in the UFC. And Jared Gordon, he has been kind of under the radar. He's been a pretty good fighter for a while, but his last fight when he got robbed by Paddy Pimblett, that definitely raised his profile pretty significantly. And now he's in a big spot here. It's almost like the UFC is kind of saying that he won the fight by giving him this main card spot against Bobby Green. And if he can win, he's going to be looking at the top 15 and looking at bigger and better things. So we'll see what happens. But, man, I'm personally pretty confident Bobby Green is going to get the job done in this fight. I think it's a pretty non-competitive fight. But one thing with Bobby Green is he does tend to fight down to the level of his competition. And he's going to make it probably more competitive than it should be. But when you look at how these guys match up, I feel like even though Bobby Green is coming off of a knockout loss, that was to Drew Dober, who one of the heaviest hitters, one of the best knockout artists in the weight class, high-level guy, probably top 10 guy. And Bobby Green was absolutely dominating the fight. He was outclassing him on the feet before he got clipped. And Jared Gordon doesn't possess that one-punch knockout power like that. He doesn't possess the speed, in my opinion, to compete on the feet with Bobby Green. And we all kind of know how Bobby Green fights at this point. I mean, the guy, he stance switches quite a bit. He has hands down, shoulder roll type style, elite level speed, elite head movement, great boxing. He's improved his kicking game, and he could take shots too. He's a durable guy, and he fights extremely high volume. He could sometimes be a little bit tit for tat, which, like I said, makes fights more competitive than they should be. But recently, he's pulled away of a lot of guys and looked dominant, like in his fight with Nasrat Haqparast. And Jared Gordon, you look at him, pressure fighter. He likes to try to come forward and land that rear cross or the big check hook, and he lacks speed, and he does have decent boxing if he can get on the inside and throw his combinations, but doesn't have that big power or ability to end fights, really, if you ask me. And he is just not nearly as dynamic or high volume or as fast as Bobby Green. I think on the feet, Gordon's going to be getting lit up in this one, trying to close the distance and come forward, and Bobby Green's just going to be, moving and grooving on the guy, and Gordon's going to have to figure out how to clinch against the cage, get him to the ground, and that's the one advantage that Gordon has is in the grappling. I think if he can get in top position with his Renzo Gracie jiu-jitsu and his black belt, he probably will be able to do some work here, control Bobby. I don't know if he'll be able to submit him, but we did see Islam run through Bobby. Obviously, I don't think Gordon's on that level, but if you can get Bobby on the ground, maybe you could have some success against him, or if you can hold him against the cage and kind of get him out of that free-flowing striking. But the thing with Bobby Green is I think he has the better wrestling of the two fighters here. I think that he's the better offensive and defensive wrestler. I think that his movement and his footwork, his counter-punching ability is going to make it hard for Gordon to get him down anyways, and Gordon's not necessarily a great wrestler, and Cardio has always been something that both these guys possess, in spades. They don't get tired. So Jared Gordon can't really rely on wearing down Bobby Green and then knocking him out or catching him once he gasses out, because Bobby isn't the type of guy to get tired. The one thing that could make people a little bit nervous is Bobby Green is talking about retiring after this fight. But the thing about it is I've heard him say that so many times, man. He was talking about retiring after the Iaquinta fight. He retired a couple times after he had some split decision losses. So I'm not truly sold on Bobby Green hanging it up after this fight, and I don't think that's going to be that much of an impact in his performance, even if he does have that mindset coming in, because I think he's had that before. So I'm going to go with Bobby Green by decision here. Gordon's a really tough guy. He has been knocked out by some elite guys, but I think that Bobby Green's more likely going to point him to a decision win and do it pretty easily. I'll say he wins. Maybe it'll be 29-28 just because he messes around a little bit, but I think it'll be like Green is pretty dominant in the fight, where maybe even rocks Gordon a few times and looks good doing it. And this next fight, we got the co-main event here. It's going to be a middleweight fight between Brad Tavares and Bruno Silva. And this is going to be the 6th UFC walk for Bruno Silva on Saturday night. He's looking to move his UFC record to 4-2. He started out 3-0 with 3 finishes, but his last 2 fights he's come up short. Dropped a pretty competitive but brutal damaging decision loss to Alex Pereira, and then got dominated against Gerald Mearshart, got finished in the 3rd round. It's possible that Silva's a different fighter now post that Pereira fight. Definitely looked a step slower in the GM3 fight. So he has to win here and prove he's still the guy who was the former M1 champion and the guy that started 3-0 in the UFC. For Brad Tavares, he's trying to rebuild again after having his 2-fight winning streak snapped last July. The UFC OG has been in the company since 2010, and he's one of the longest tenured fighters in the company. He still is fighting at a high level, and his last fight he came against Dricus du Plessis, who since that fight is catapulted into the top 5. And when he fought Tavares, I don't even think he was ranked. Brad was the ranked fighter, and du Plessis made a name off of Brad. In hindsight, that wasn't a bad loss, though. He had a back-and-forth fight with Dricus, who's obviously potentially in line for the next title shot. Previous to that, he'd beaten Antonio Carlos Jr. and Omari Akhmedov, which are okay wins, but both those guys are now in the PFL. Funny enough, it's something that's pretty crazy, is none of the fighters that Brad Tavares has beaten in the UFC are still in the company. And that isn't to say Tavares has beaten low-level opponents. He just has been with the UFC since 2010, and he fought a different era of fighters for the most part. When he's gotten to fight these new breed guys in recent years, he hasn't gotten the job done. He's lost to Dricus, he lost to Edmund Shabazian, he lost to Israel Adesanya, and overall he's 12-6 in the UFC. His other 3 losses came against Yoel Romero, Robert Whittaker, and Tim Bosch. I don't really see Bruno Silva as a new generation fighter. He's fought 30 times. He's 33 years old. He had his first fight in 2010. But obviously, having your first fight in 2010 and debuting in the UFC in 2010 are way different things. So Tavares is someone that's had probably the more wear and tear. And Bruno Silva, he style-wise is a power striker, and Brad Tavares is a technical striker. So it's going to be a stand-up battle, and it's going to be fun to see who can kind of implement what they want to do. Silva's a guy that walks guys down, hands low, wide stance. He could stance switch, and he can be a little bit slow with his feet and his footwork, and he could struggle against guys that move a lot. But Tavares is someone that usually likes to stick in the pocket too and work the jab, work the leg kicks, and bang. He really doesn't use a ton of movement and footwork. But in this fight, maybe if I were Tavares in his camp, I would try to use more lateral movement, work off the jab, and walk Silva into more shots rather than sitting in the pocket. Silva really is looking to get in a range where he can land his big looping hooks, overhands, underrated head movement, and he could slip and return with power punches. He'll go to the body, too, to open up the head, and he has that one-punch knockout power. But he's very hittable, and he's been durable historically, but his last 2 fights, he's taken a lot of damage. He almost got knocked out a couple times against Pereira. he was able to survive to a decision in that fight, but his last fight he got dropped and then choked out in the third round against GM3. So I do question Silva's chin a little bit. Tavares on the feet is more of a guy that he wants to work off the jab, 1-2s, try to land that big right overhand or right hook, and he will sit down on some punches, but he's mainly just kind of pot-shotting you to win a decision, and he could stay very sharp, very technical. He has that Hawaiian chin where he's pretty durable. We have seen him put out a couple times, but we've also seen him go to decisions and tough fights with guys like Izzy, guys like Dricus du Plessis. So I think that he's proven that his chin is there. It's just going to come down to, in my opinion, he has to be a little bit more defensively responsible in this one. Technically, as a striker and overall fighter, I think Brad Tavares is significantly better. He's not someone that's going to go for takedowns, and I don't see Bruno Silva going for takedowns either, so I'm just going to talk primarily about the stand-up in this fight. And Tavares is the slicker striker with the jab. He throws straighter shots. He's probably a little more defensively responsible in terms of having his hands high a lot and guarding his head a little bit better, but he just can't get stuck in the mud here against Silva. He can't get clipped early with some big power shots, or he could get hurt, and Silva's a tough guy that's going to bring it for 3 rounds unless he's diminished more significantly than we know. So it's going to be a tough fight. I think it honestly could go either way. I would more go dog or pass on this one, where if I was betting it, I would lean more towards Bruno Silva, but I'm just a little bit worried about the damage that he's accumulated in recent fights, his last couple especially, and I just don't know if he's going to be that same guy. He had a fight scheduled for December that he had to pull out of with an injury too, so potentially he could still be dealing with some lingering issues from that. So ultimately, I'm going to go with Brad Tavares to win this one in a competitive decision here, and I think he'll be able to kind of get back in the mix a little bit in terms of that top 15. And finally, we got the main event here. We got Sergei Pavlovich, who's right now surging, trying to take out Curtis Blaydes and make himself the clear number 1 contender for the belt next. Curtis Blaydes, he's a guy that has done it the hard way in the UFC. He's built himself up again for the 3rd time, and now he's right on the cusp of getting another title shot, which has eluded him throughout his UFC career. And now the boogeyman for Curtis Blaydes is a little bit out of the picture, where he had the Francis Ngannou as the champion. He had the 2 losses to Francis Ngannou, and it was going to be probably hard for him to get a 3rd shot, like we've been talking about a lot recently with guys like Max Holloway, with guys like Robert Whittaker. And now Curtis Blaydes is seeing John Jones there. He's talking about John Jones, talking about potentially fighting for the belt, which hopefully he's not overlooking Sergei Pavlovich, because that would be very silly to do that. But I think he could potentially be the biggest threat to John Jones that I see in the weight class outside of Stipe, and maybe even including Stipe, just because the age of Stipe and not really knowing exactly how he's going to look. But Curtis Blaydes has a lot of reason to be extremely motivated, and he's going to have to be firing all cylinders against Pavlovich, who his last 2 fights, he's taken out established guys, took out a guy that beat Curtis Blaydes, and he took out both of them in less than a minute, with Tai Tuivasa and Curtis Blaydes, and Derek Lewis, both getting knocked out in less than a minute. And he's looking beastly, and a lot of people are thinking he's going to be the next big thing, the next guy to win the title. Curtis Blaydes, his last fight, he got a huge win on paper, but it was anticlimactic with the way that it ended against Tom Aspinall. And now he's looking to get a real signature win to kind of catapult him into that title shot opportunity. And I think if he wins, he will probably get the title shot. It's just a little murky in heavyweight now. Obviously, with John having the belt, it's harder to know exactly what's going to happen, especially with the Stipe thing kind of lingering in the background. But as far as what these 2 guys are going to do on Saturday night, how they're going to match up in the cage, you look at Sergei Pavlovich, and it's tough to really know it's tough to really know how he's going to do in this type of fight with a guy like Curtis Blaydes, because honestly, man, we haven't seen him fight any wrestlers really at all in his whole career. And you did see his loss to Overeem, where he got taken down in his first UFC fight, beat up on the ground, and finished with ground and pound in the first round. But You look at all his other fights in the UFC, he's only had to defend one takedown attempt against Shamil Abdurakhimov, who's not a wrestler, and it was a lackluster takedown attempt from Abdurakhimov. And besides that, he hasn't had to defend any takedowns in any of his other fights. You know, with Curtis Blaydes, he's going to have that thought way more in the back of his head that he's going to have to potentially defend takedowns. When you look at his style, he's a very long southpaw boxer, doesn't really throw a lot of kicks, and mostly he just works the 2-3 or 3-2 combination. And he's very accurate and fast. When he lands, he'll close that gap flurry on you and take you out. And his last two fights, he was fighting the perfect matchup for him because he's really good at slipping and ripping. He has great head movement and eyes for a heavyweight, good speed, and he can get out of the way of shots return with his 3-2s and put you unconscious. And he was fighting Derek Lewis and Tai Tuivasa, two guys that want to come forward, push the pace on you, and go to war, try to brawl and knock you out. So they both came forward, tried to brawl with a real technical boxer with power that's super long and southpaw, and Sergei was able to clip him on the chin and knock him out. Whereas with Curtis Blaydes, we're going to see Blaydes on the outside moving a lot. He is one of the faster, slicker footwork guys for heavyweight in the UFC. He has great feints. He's going to be constantly level change feinting, and he's going to be working more long range striking off the jab, off the straight shots. He isn't really a big kicker, but Blaydes is improving his striking quite a bit. He's getting better with angles, with distance control, and I feel like Sergei is a guy that I've seen in other fights when fighters stick on the outside and stay on the outside with him. He can be very low volume. He really relies on guys coming to him for him to get the finish, and if Curtis Blaydes can kind of not allow himself to walk into counters, then I think Pavlovich is going to really have limited offense. Pavlovich isn't the type of guy that's going to walk you down and be offensively trying to end the fight. He is going to wait for you to make a mistake and then finish you and capitalize on it, which is going to be potentially available in this one. I mean, we have seen Curtis Blaydes run in the uppercut against Derek Lewis and get sent into the shadow realm, so there is potential for Pavlovich to time a shot and knock him out, but I think that it's probably going to be low volume on the feet because Curtis Blaydes is going to fight smart, and I could see the first round being really boring, maybe even the first round and a half. But ultimately, why I'm leaning towards Curtis Blaydes and I can't pick Pavlovich here is just I haven't seen him defend takedowns against anyone really. The one fight with Overeem, when he ended on his back, he got ground and pounded out really quickly, and I don't necessarily think that Curtis Blaydes has that power and ground and pound that Overeem has, but he has way better wrestling, is the way bigger guy, and I don't know how Sergei Pavlovich is going to react if he gets taken down. Is he going to have that wrestling cardio in the next round if he gets taken down and smothered for 3 minutes in the first round, elbowed into oblivion a little bit? Is he going to be able to get back up and kind of have that same gas tank in the second and same ability to knock you out in the second, third, fourth, fifth? I'm not sure, but both these guys have been 5 rounds, and Pavlovich has looked good cardio-wise going 5 rounds, but they were in low-volume striking affairs, not in a fight where he was having to defend takedowns or put on his back. And I just question his wrestling, man, and I question his ability to fight against a well-rounded, high-level fighter for 5 rounds. I think that Curtis Blaydes is much more proven. Curtis Blaydes is going to have elite cardio. He trains up at elevation. He's a heavyweight that can go for over 20 takedowns in a fight. We've seen him do it. And he has great top control, great wrestling. His striking is leveling up. And I feel like he just has to avoid getting clipped and getting countered with the, one shot or a flurry knockout type of scenario, and he'll get the job done here. So I'm leaning towards Curtis Blaydes being able to show his smarts, because he is a smart guy in my opinion, and getting the win. And I do think that the over 1.5 rounds is a decent play. So personally, I'm leaning towards Curtis Blaydes. I'm going to say he wins via 3rd round KO TKO in this one with ground and pound after wearing on Pavlovich a little bit. And obviously at heavyweight, it's hard to be super confident. Pavlovich has that one-punch knockout power to change the fight at any time. But I'm going with Curtis Blaydes to get the job done in this one and get the victory. And so there you have it, guys. That's the full card breakdown for UFC Vegas 71, UFC Fight Night Pavlovich versus Blaydes. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something. Hit that like button right now if you're listening to the video. That would really be appreciated by me. I would really hope you guys engage with this video more. Put some comments down below. Tell me who you're picking, what you're betting on, what you think of my picks, and everything like that. But as far as my most confident pick on this card, it's a hard one to be my most confident pick. I'm actually going to go with Brogan Walker, I suppose. And for my parlay of the week, I'm going to go with Brogan Walker and Bobby Green. Brogan Walker. I'm sorry. Scratch that. Not Brogan Walker. Yasmin Lucindo. So Yasmin Lucindo is my most confident pick. And Yasmin Lucindo and Bobby Green as the parlay of the week. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll be back, like always, on the channel breaking down fights. I'm thinking about putting out a Bellator 294 prediction video. Actually, if I get 5 comments on this video telling me to put out that Bellator 294 video, then I will put it out tomorrow. So make sure to put a comment down below if you want to see that. But besides that, guys, I'm out. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. Like the video. Subscribe to patreon.com/MMAPredictionGuru for all the bets and predictions and breakdowns. And I'll talk to you guys later.